Back in the day, before I was older than the turtle from the Neverending Story, I loved watching college humor on YouTube. They used to make skit videos, but they're called Dropout now and do other stuff, I don't know. Anyway, I still think they made some pretty good stuff. If Google was a guy, how to tell if you're basic, how tall is Grant. They were good for a laugh, a gaffe, and dare I say, even a goof. Then one day, they uploaded a skit with a new guy that I hadn't seen before, called Tide CEO. This was back during that craze when kids were chomping on detergent pods like they were made of deep fried ice cream. This skit was the first time I'd watched Brennan, and in just those 4 minutes, he solidified himself as the funniest person I'd seen on the College Humor channel during their entire run. The CEO series actually ended up being one of their most popular and was even referenced on Dimension 20 by Brennan himself.
That made it into the commercial. Direct slander. Us.
Now the reason I'm bringing this up is to point out that we've been watching Brennan excel in one of the skills that make him such a good DM since long before Dimension 20 even existed. Let me explain. Hi, my name's Cam, welcome back to Rogue's Roll Call. I make videos about D&D, so if that's your kind of thing, then I would love it if you subscribed and stuck around. So I'd like to make a few videos about some of the popular figures in the Dungeons & Dragons world, or the TTRPG world in general. And I thought we'd start with Brennan because, put simply, I think he might be the most entertaining DM that I've ever watched. This whole video is going to be a pretty unbridled praise fest, so you're gonna have to forgive me. I'm gonna be going full simp mode. I'm sure you're familiar with him, but this is Brennan Lee Mulligan, and he is the main face of the hit D&D YouTube show Dimension 20. D20's shtick, and arguably the thing that sets them apart, is playing campaigns that fall more into being urban fantasy, sci-fi, or magical realism, rather than the more traditional, medieval-focused fantasy format that you'd find in most other games, like Critical Role. Their games are usually more colourful, more willing to lean into the comedy, and follow more intimate and relatable stakes, which results in some really unique stories. Personally, I tend to prefer to play and watch those more traditional types of fantasy D&D. You know, the old like sword and sorcery type stuff. But like I said in my skill check video, if the cast and the story is good, I can get into the more goofy kinds of D&D campaign. Dimension 20 is filled with some of the funniest and most entertaining people on the internet. So even though a D&D game about a kingdom full of candy wouldn't normally be my thing, I had no hesitation really, being that I was already familiar with most of these people from College Humor. So that's where Brennan pulls up his chair, but what about the man himself? What makes Brennan Lee Mulligan such a good DM, or at the very least, what makes him so entertaining to watch? Well, you're welcome to let me know your answers to that question in the comments below, but here's what I think. So I figured I'd start with the biggest one, the thing that I think has helped Brennan carve out his name in not just the D&D space, but YouTube comedy in general. Put simply, he is a master of improv. Like a lot of actors and comedians, early in his career, Brennan was trained in improv. But without downplaying the enormous amount of hard work that I'm sure he put into that, I think it goes further than the training. After watching countless of his skits, his interviews, his panels, and the D&D games that he plays in, I've learned one thing in particular when it comes to Brennan's improv and why he tends to outshine other people who might have similar training. He is very good at 3 things that normally most other people, even well-trained people, would not be able to lock down in tandem. He's fast, he's clever, and he ramps. Let me clarify. Fast. Very rarely will you see Brennan fumbling for a response. Now don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing to stop and take a moment to consider your responses, especially if you're creating fiction or trying to be funny on the spot, but Brennan just doesn't seem to need to. Clever. As for clever, some people are good at responding or being funny at the drop of a hat, but in most cases, their response would still be pretty surface level, maybe just like an off-the-cuff joke or observation. In Brennan's case, he seems to be able to draw from a thesaurus that sits right inside his brain at a moment's notice, saying something that sounds way too profound for whatever the situation is. I will have some examples, don't worry. He ramps. So by this, I just mean that if you watch someone who does respond quickly, even if they're able to respond with something clever and funny, it'll usually only be like a really short or quick response and they'll leave it at that, which is fine, but Brennan has made a name for himself by going into increasingly unhinged rants that build and build towards their own climax. There are literally YouTube compilations of this very specific habit of his. So when you put these three skills together, you get someone who can drop a hilarious monologue that most people would spend a full day planning out just off the top of his dome. Now, I obviously can't play them in full, but I'll give you two examples of where he has done all three of these things. I would recommend his rant on snacking.
A mouth in my bag so that I can have a friend shoveling salami into an open furnace in my torso while I narrate. And I'm not sorry. I like to snack. To answer your question, almonds.
Or his meltdown on the Game Changer game show.
Flying too close to the sun, but it seems Daedalus, our little master crafter over here, had some wax wings of his own, didn't he? Wanted to see his sun fall from the sky. Oh, how close to the sun he flew. Well, I'm not having it. I solved your labyrinth, puzzle master. The Minotaurs escaped, and you're gonna get the horns, buddy.
It goes without saying, but Brennan's knack for improv is an extremely valuable tool in the belt of any DM, especially one that is DMing for a D&D game that is being uploaded for an audience. It's obvious watching any D&D content that Brennan's involved with that he loves TTRPGs. Whether it's in his own campaigns, interviews, or guest spots on other shows, he'll always prove at least a few times that he has put in the work understanding the story that he's telling. Building an interesting or a deep world or story is one thing, but taking the time and effort to understand how that world and that story works on a functional level takes a lot of effort outside of the table. I'm sure if you're a DM, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know how that feels. If you've ever watched Brennan on Actually, you'd know that he has an uncanny talent for remembering super niche and obscure details about popular fantasy IPs like Lord of the Rings. That's something that he seems to have given the same amount of respect for when it comes to the homebrew D&D campaigns that he's involved with. And I think that's pretty impressive. That's one of the main things that I respect so much about Matthew Mercer, and it's rare that you'll see someone rival Matt on that aspect. Matt himself has been impressed by Brennan's knowledge or respect for the lore, whether that be in Exandria Unlimited or in this viral clip.
When with strange disposals, even death lies dead. And I am...
Damn.
Wow.
It's cool when GMs and other GMs like do good. That's great. That's good. That was
I could give you like 100 more pretentious sounding platitudes about respecting the story, but honestly, it's really simple. It's fun watching people who enjoy the game. It's fun playing with people who enjoy the game, especially if they enjoy it so much that they completely immerse themselves in that world and take the extra time and the effort to completely understand it. So just before I talked about Brennan's improv background and how that ties into the comedy of Dimension 20, but I think it's really important to point out another skill of not just Brennan, but everyone else at D20. They know how to balance the comedy with the drama. Now that's not to say that comedy can't be dramatic or sincere, but we have seen a lot of times, especially recently, what happens when artists lose grip on that balance. We get Love and Thunder, a movie that couldn't spend one moment showing emotion without having to include a punchline. While D20 does have a lot more comedy and general goofiness than most other D&D shows, the cast, and Brennan in particular, know that for the characters, world, and story to have any real emotional weight, they have to be sincere when the situation calls for it. Just as Brennan's improv shines in the funny moments, he can just as easily deliver some of the most intense and retrospective monologues I've ever heard. Very few other creators in the D&D space have as good a talent for setting the appropriate tone to fully immerse themselves, the players, and the audience in what is happening right now. And he seems to be able to do that again at the drop of a hat. So there are just some of the reasons that I think Brennan Lee Mulligan has, at least for the time being, earned his place in the D&D Hall of Icons. But what do you think about this guy? What do you think about the CEO of Tide? Are you a fan? Are you not? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear it. Or how about this? Are there any other figureheads in the TTRPG community that you would like me to make a video on? Thank you so much for watching, especially for watching through the whole video. That is very kind of you. I make lots of videos about Dungeons and Dragons and I have plenty more to come, so if that's your kind of thing, then I really would love it if you stuck around. But if not, thank you anyway. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Catch ya.